Today is day 1 of 3 of our Your Candidates, Your Questions segment.
And candidate Josh Matlow joins us live in studio. So Josh, you're the first candidate joining us here for the questions from our viewers. And we did get a ton of them. So good to have you here.
Good to be here.
Let's talk about this first. Before we get to the viewer questions, though, you're going to come out this morning and kind of try to poke holes in your opponent's platforms. You say there's sort of missing money or missing details and things along those lines. What is it you're finding that is sort of particularly missing in terms of the details that voters need to know from 1 week from now?
Yeah, and I wouldn't even describe it as poking holes. I mean, the holes are there. I'm just showing the public what they are. Okay. And so, you know, Kevin Page, the former parliamentary budget officer, has verified my platform. He said that it's honest, it's true, and it really covers the bases as far as how I'm going to pay for the things that I'm committing to. Olivia Chow has about $125 million missing in her commitments. So in other words, she's made a lot of promises, but there isn't a lot of substance behind them. And Mark Saunders, quite equally, has about $100 million missing to support or justify his promises, which frankly aren't that many. But he said he's going to make a lot of cuts, and he also hasn't said what they're going to be very clearly as well. I could say the same for many of the other candidates, and the reality is, whether, you know, no matter what I say, and no matter what any other candidate says, I hope that both, you know, those of you who interview us, along with the public before they vote, just check the facts. You know, read through the platforms, really understand themselves, if they make sense to them, if they're supported by facts and evidence, and then vote for the candidate with the plan that will improve safety, affordability, and improve services in our city in an honest way. And I honestly believe that one of the reasons we're in such a financial hole at City Hall and why many people don't vote, frankly, these days, is because there are a lot of promises during every election that are meant to just win an election, but aren't meant to govern effectively. And I want to take a different approach. And that's why I've been very upfront about what I'm doing.
Yeah, and we're going to take a different approach this morning. So let's get to the viewer questions. I hope you're ready for them, Josh.
Of course, of course.
This one coming from Jim, who writes in and says, as a middle-class citizen of Toronto, what specific actions can you take as mayor to make housing more affordable? Because both rent and home prices are driven by the market. And as mayor, you have no control over the market. Building low-income housing does nothing for those close to or in the middle income bracket who are just looking for decent housing in a decent neighborhood.
Yeah, that's
this is from Jim.
Yeah, Jim is referring to what we often say, the missing middle. A lot of people who, I mean, we need more social housing, obviously, for people in poverty. The wealthy are doing fine. But there's a lot of people in the mid-range income who just cannot afford to live in the city. Rent is through the roof, and homeownership is a dream that people are giving up on. So we need a combination of things, and anyone who says they've got the magic bullet is lying to you. The reality is we can move forward on building more affordable rental housing on city lands, and I have a plan to do that. Rent geared to income, below market, and market with rent control, because the city controls our own land. So even though Doug Ford got rid of rent control in Ontario, we can do it on our own properties. We also need to ensure that throughout our neighborhoods, there's different options. So in other words, not just $2 to $3 million houses for everybody, which most people cannot afford, but options where you might be able to move into a multiplex or a townhome, different price points for different people. We also need to improve the supply of purpose-built rental. And so while I want to build public housing, we also can look at the tax rate and look at the tools that we have to incentivize the private sector to build the kind of housing supply that we need, and much more. In other words, it's not just one answer, but a mayor can effectively improve the conditions in the market for more people to finally be able to live in this city instead of have to think, I might not be able to live here because I can't afford to live even in the neighborhood that I grew up in.
Okay, that's trying to get through quite a few questions here if we can. Josh, another one here. The city has a fiscal shortfall. Are you going to waste our tax dollars renaming Dundas Street?
No. The city has a $1.5 billion shortfall. We need to focus on everything from snow clearing to road repair to helping our most vulnerable in the city. And we need to keep a very clear focus on those priorities. And we don't have the ability to frankly be distracted by issues that I know are difficult and controversial, but really right now we just need to get this budget in order or else we can't fix this city.
Right.
Answer's no. Okay, very clear there. Next up, this viewer says, how do you plan to tackle gridlock in downtown Toronto? Major arteries are now down to one lane, Danforth and Bloor, and GO Transit is not always an option. This gridlock also impacts our ambulance, first responders, and delivery services to the downtown core. We need to figure out what our priority is. Is it bikes, Cafe TO, or first responders responding to emergencies?
Yeah, well, I actually disagree with the premise of that question, because we do need all of that. Obviously, first responders are always the top priority, but there is a place for Cafe TL because it's so good for businesses. It creates a vibrant cafe culture in the city that people really want and to enjoy. We need safe ways to cycle. We need safe ways to walk. But we also need to improve transit. I'm going to be reversing the cuts to the TTC, the way that council and the former mayor had cut, because we want to make sure that people see it as the better way. I'm going to be expanding service to transit as well. We also need to, clamp down on people that stop in the middle of a traffic lane during rush hour and hike the fines on them. I don't believe that developers should have this divine right to take over lanes for 2 or 3 years at a time. There's a lot of things we can do. And again, it's not one simple answer to a complex problem, but there's a number of things we need to do to make sure that those of us who are in traffic have different options so that there's less traffic for all of us.
Wouldn't that be nice? Okay,
Yes.
let's get to the last question this morning from our viewers. This one says, what are your thoughts about pedestrian streets for Toronto? An interesting question.
Yeah.
Our city has none, Michael points out.
I love that thought. I'd like to make that thought a reality. Now, it's got to be done thoughtfully. It's got to be done well. We don't want to increase congestion and traffic in our city. Right. But you go to cities around the world, Paris and Rome, you go to cities right here in Canada like Montreal, and it's good for business, it's good for people, it creates destinations for us to have, animated public realm. Toronto has always reached for the height of mediocrity when it comes to our public spaces. A lot of concrete squares, and that's about it. And we can do a lot better. So yes, I want to have a city that has just vibrant, animated places for people to go.
Okay, very good. Josh Matlow, mayoral candidate, thanks so much for joining us and answering all our viewer questions.